You're still watching Frontline from New Frontiers Television. Today we're talking about a prevailing issue affecting Nigeria as a country, and that is the issue of brain drain crisis, sometimes referred to as the jackpot syndrome. Over the years, a couple of Nigerians, young persons, have been migrating abroad in large droves. While this has created a lot of opportunities for those young individuals, it is also an issue that has affected the nation as a whole. While people are getting opportunities for greener pastures, the country seems to be significantly affected in a lot of sectors, leading to brain drain, of course, in sectors like healthcare, education, tech, and of course, entrepreneurship. Joining me to dissect this issue this morning is Mr. Felix Idowu, a career strategist. You're welcome to the studios.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay, for context, can you help us understand what this old jackpot syndrome entails and why it seems to be gaining traction recent years?
All right, thank you very much. Yes, the word jackpot syndrome, incidentally and interestingly, is a term coined and invented in Nigeria, particularly the Yoruba race of Nigeria. That means to run or flee in search for something, or in another context, maybe to escape. Now, the question is escape from what and from where? All right, so that word has been used over and again until it has become so popularized, not just locally, but globally. And of course, we have a lot of researches that have been undertaken lately to that effect. Of course, what jackpot syndrome implies mainly and fundamentally is the way or an act or the process through which young people aspire to move from their local country, and in this context, Nigeria, to a place in search for greener pasture, and then most importantly, to give expression to their giftings and endowments. So basically, this has led to a huge gap in the workforce structure in our country. So jackpot syndrome actually has created a major sin in terms of employability, in terms of what people consider to be the value they have in relation to what they can get in the local country compared to what they have in other countries. So when they leave and they are able to find expression for themselves, to them, they have escaped the economic downturn and what is most likely going to be the good consequences, if there is even a word to be placed that way, for their own career future.
Well, I mean, based on your own experience and having dealt with a lot of persons who have, at the end of the day, jackpot out of the country, and of course are also being familiar with the workforce. Now, what will you say are the key factors that are leading young Nigerians out of the country?
All right, thank you very much. Yes. Someone said many years ago that the opportunity of a lifetime must be seized in the lifetime of that opportunity. We all have this one life to live, and then many will actually invest their lives, and a good number will spend, and many will possibly waste it. So this actually play in the lives of many, especially when they are thinking about where they have been over the years, and after some time there is this tendency for restlessness. All right, so what are these things that actually propel the need for people to come to that conclusion that I think I need to move, I need to emigrate from where I am to where I am going, even without absolute understanding of what they're going to really meet there? Number one, some of the factors include economic downturn. And it will be a way of being unfair to assume that the way by which we have been riding has not been without some major challenges over the years, especially, and this has had a root cause particularly in the last 2 to 3 decades in Nigeria, because the concept of emigration, particularly mass movement from Nigeria by the youth to other countries, has been on for many years. And one of the primary reasons or the factor leading to that is economic downturn. When people are actively capable of working and contribute meaningfully to the economic situation of society, economic structure of the society, and they are not actually finding that easily done, or they cannot predict what happens to them economically, that actually lead people. Another good factor is the political instability. We know not just Nigeria alone, but Africa as a whole, we have been laced with incessant, as a result of leadership deficit, we have been laced with incessant political instability. And this, in a way, has actually led to a bit of retrogression in terms of our sense of progress that we have experienced over time. And unfortunately, even though there may not be warfare, there may not be civil unrest, but there seems to be a sort of disconnect between one political or administration to the other. There is no continuity in plans and models. And all of this creates a whole lot of confusion for many young people. So political instability seems to be the second. And the third is some of the social challenges, which herein we can actually identify with factors affecting issue of security, sense of survival, and the need to feel secure seems to be one of the primary needs of human by Abrams Maslow hierarchy of motivation. People really want to survive. They want to be loved. They want to feel secured. And that's why when you see children, especially babes, at their formative stage, they feel more secure around people that they believe by intuition that doesn't prompt any threats to them. So when we look at economic downturn in our nation over the years, we look at political instability, we look at insecurity, all of these actually lead many young people to start thinking. And most importantly, when their predecessor or our parents or their grandparents or people that have actually enjoyed the good old days doesn't seem to give any sense of hope about the future. That in those days, as if every good that has ever happened in the past. Now, if we were not in the past, and the reality is telling us that those that lived in the past have not been able to transfer the wealth, have not been able to transfer the values of the past into the present, then what the future holds seems to be a bit uncertain. So this uncertainty actually leads many people to explore the world of unknown, if we may actually put it that way.
Let's take a look at the impact this brain drain has on different sectors. But before we move to that, now can you tell us, having done your own research and from what you can perceive, what industries seem to be the most affected?
When it comes to available statistical data, we really don't have so much comprehensive database and then that we could lay on. But the few we can actually pick in frequency here and there, we discovered that many sectors are actually affected. Healthcare, education, IT, and technology, of course, information technology, and many others. But let's take a good look at the healthcare sector. Recently, in a conference by the Medical and Dental Consultants Association of Nigeria, they were actually lamenting over this issue of Japa syndrome and how it has affected the healthcare sector in the country. Of course, they said as it stands presently, we have just barely around 6,000 consultants in Nigeria. 6,000 consultants in Nigeria with a population of over 230 million. And we're getting that. And then out of these 6,000 that we currently have, about 1,700 consultants are above the age of 55, which means they have barely about 5 years more in service. And over 1,300 of them actually emigrated in the last 5 years. Now, what makes it more challenging, and the reason why this is a food for thought and the need for us to start engaging in reverse thinking, and not just complaining and not just blaming the young people that are actually living, is because in the next 5 years, about 1,700 of them will actually be leaving. But the challenging part is that by the nature of the way most of these consultants become consultants, Nigeria produce about 1 to 2 consultants per annum. Now, so we know the reason why, the healthcare sector is deeply and greatly affected, because when we take a look at some of this migration, it has actually benefited some nations more than others, because they were able, after the post-COVID experience made most of these developed countries, particularly let's take UK for example, to remodel their system, because they are gradually moving into aging economies or aging society, where most of their young people are actually not so much saturating the system, but most of their aged are actually the ones almost around. So they needed to open up and absorb many agile and young people into the system. And this has led to the policies that allowed for many young people to come. And when most of these policies are put in place for immigration, you realize that the productive people that are migrating legitimately and legally, they have the tendency of moving their family along with them. So that has another grave consequences for countries where these productive people are actually living en masse. That's number one. The second sector that is greatly affected is the educational sector. Now, it is important to know that the economies of societies or nations actually stem from the human capital that are built within the educational space. Now, America did not become world economy or world power by economy and commerce alone. They became world power by education, because at a point, about 128 best universities out of the 200 best universities are in America. At the moment, when you're talking about the best 10 institutions in the world, if all the 10 are not found in America, you'll be talking about 9. So now this actually says a lot, but unfortunately, because our educational system has been struggling with, number one, curriculum mismanagement, if I would like to put it that way, which is not meeting with the demand of the fast-paced global economy, that actually has led many smart researchers that are looked, or if some of them headhunted from these leading research institutes across the globe, to be brought to their nations. Another major challenge that educational system has been deeply and greatly affected with as a result of this JAPA syndrome is in terms of the incessant industrial action that we call strike. Now, I know of a very typical example of one particular young lady. She emerged at a particular time in Nigeria as the overall best student in WAEC, and she got admission in one of our premier universities, of course, one of our fourth generation universities, to study law. And then within the first 2 years, there had been incessant industrial action. Then some people actually had to plead with the parent that don't let the grace and the endowment of God upon the lives of this lady to be truncated by the incessant industrial action in the country. Why can't you look for funds and money and send the lady abroad? And of course, they heeded to that advice. Of course, they were public servants. They were able to get loan. They sent the lady to UK. Now, it will interest you to note that the lady from the first year, second year, she started trailblazing like the way she did in Nigeria. And eventually, she ended up becoming the first black valedictorian of their university, in the history of that university. At the time, yes, I don't want to actually mention it. It was publicized in the news and then in a number of dailies. So I've talked about the healthcare sector. I've talked about the education. IT or technology seems to be the backbone of every development in the 21st century. Unfortunately, most of our tech guys are moving to the Silicon Valley in US, are moving to most of these nations. Why? Because they seem not to have commensurate value. Of course, there are other factors that may be responsible to that. Some youth may not be driven by purpose. There are people that are not purpose-driven. There are people that they can't, because the developed world we are really talking about, many of those nations actually spent time curating, looking for ways to build their system, and they endured, they weathered the storm, and they were able to experience the kind of boom they are experiencing now. So that manufacturing sector also is actively affected because the productive age bracket that are actively involved in manufacturing are between the ages of 18 and 40. And these are the large chunk of people that are actually migrating. So this actually has non-negligible effects in the entire economy. Of course, mentioning just few ones actually give us a cue into the various sectors that have been affected.
Now, so what effect does this have on the quality of services that we seems to now be receiving in Nigeria?
Yes, we have already started experiencing some of those things. Poor services everywhere. Number one, the available few ones will feel they are disadvantaged by not having the wherewithal, so to say, in terms of financial capability to facilitate this trip. So those of them that are behind, if we don't revamp the economy with policies that are actually coherent to development and sustainability, then the few ones that are available will be discouraged. Now, the impact these actually have on our quality of service delivery is that, number one, it is the so-called smart people. A good number of them are actually living. We are not saying not all of the smart people, but the best of our brains are living. It's leading to brain drain. And this implies that in terms of skillfulness and dexterity of application of skills needed to turn problems or challenges to solutions, profitable solutions, we will have incapacitation to get that done, which means the quality of people and the volume of people to solve problems will really not be sufficient compared to the magnitude of the problem that we have. Now, take a good look at it. We have over 600,000 graduates that are leaving higher institution annually. Over 600,000 graduates. Now, what is the current absorbing capacity that we have within the economy to get them into different sectors? Now, we really don't seem to have that. So now the available people in the healthcare sector, many of them, especially with the condition of service, a good number of them don't seem to have the kind of motivation. So it will lead to demotivation. That is one. The second thing is that when people are not motivated enough, they wouldn't actually put in their best. And the quality of service delivery, particularly the heterogeneity of service, actually implies that people may not actually have the same kind of experience if they are looking for services in organizations. For example, take a look at the healthcare sector. A good number of our hospitals, lately a number of them have been protesting. There has been incessant demand for pay raise, a number of them, their emolument, their remuneration, and a whole lot of other things. If all these things are not met, yes, I'm not saying the government is absolutely and 100% responsible for almost everything happening. But you see, the truth of the matter is that the ball is in their courts. If we don't come up with something very viable that could help to retain the interest and the will of these people to want to build the system and absorbing new people into the system in order for us to revamp our economy, then the struggle will continue. So the quality of service delivery has been reduced, especially across sectors. Technological wise, we could see what has been happening in our fintech lately. We see what is happening in most of our institutions where they are supposed to be technologically driven in educational technology, the use of modern day technological tools for teaching and learning, either in the classroom or whatever. But the whole generation that are still within the system cannot move at the pace young people will naturally move when it comes to adaptability to technology. So these are some of the challenges, and it affects the quality of service delivery. And in conclusion on that note, people have the sense of comparison. If for whatever reason, because a good reason for failure will never be equal to success. If we are not delivering quality, we are not giving quality service, consumers or customers actually will not want to understand why you are not delivering. Then we want to go. Why is it that people are moving from Nigeria, sending their kids if they can afford studies in UK or US or European countries? Why are they taking their children to Ghana? Why are they taking their children to Uganda? Why are they taking their children to other neighboring countries? It's because they feel they want to get value for money. We want people not graduating from the institution only bagging certificate, but they want them to be skillful and be able to solve problems. But that has not actually been obtainable, especially in the last few years as a result of some of these challenges.
Okay, now let's look at how realistic some of these expectations young Nigerians have about migrating are. Because when you speak with a young person, everybody just feels like, oh, once I leave Nigeria, everything becomes better. Now, how realistic is this thought?
Yes, and that is the unfortunate part of the whole story. Many a times, when people leave certainty for uncertainty, it raises a number of questions. There is need for deep reflection, and the whole essence of education is so that we can have a balanced opinion, we can engage in data-driven decision-making model before we eventually embark on our plans. Action without necessary preparation is the cause of every failure. Action without necessary preparation is the cause of every failure. Now, because from the media point of view, from information we see on social media and all of those, yes, they are secondary source of information. Now, when we hear from people that are actually there, we will see that many a times it is not always greener at the other side the way we always assume them to be. It comes with a whole lot of other challenges. Number one, even though they also are expanding and opening their economy and their society up for young people, because it has always been a generational thing. And don't let us forget that this concept of Japa we're talking about that is happening in the 21st century, there was always a forced emigration in those days through slavery, that lasted for more than 600 years, and that actually pushed more than 12 million active young people from the shores of Africa. And Nigeria in particular lost between, there has not been any stable and valid statistics on how many young people Nigeria actually left between. Some put it for 80 million, some put it for 120 million, some put it for less than that. But whatever it is, millions of active people actually left. Now, the same model is being replaced because these people that left back then, they were taken to build the economies, to build their society, to work on their plantations, to build their economy for what it has become over the years. All right? So the same is coming this way, but in a very different approach and model. But when people voluntarily now leave, imagine someone that was actually on the average earning modest income, because for an act of Japa, the process that it involves financially is a bit enormous. All right? So somebody must have had a means of livelihood to even to be credit worthy, to obtain facilities, loan facility to fund that expedition. All right? All right. So when people like that actually are about living, especially when it has to be moving with the entire family, they sell up their properties, they sell whatever, maybe their cars and whatever, and they don't give second option for if we get there and it doesn't seem to be working, we'll really come back. So when eventually they get there, they realize the process of integration is a major challenge there. And many things don't seem to be as expected, before leaving. Of course, they are seeing the statistics over there. They are seeing that people seem to be feeling cool. Considerably, there are good people that have actually been able to integrate, but most of the time, part of the challenges they face is acceptance into the economy with the knowledge base you are coming with from your developing country. Some of them are not accepted into the economy. Some of them have to undergo a form of re-education. Some of them have to take some licenses for them to practice professionally. Some of them have to go via the route of enrolling afresh as if they have never actually bagged any degree before coming there. And this poses a major challenge. So for the first time, the reality of if we don't face our fear, we are most likely going to fail. Because the natural propensity to fail is higher when you have very, very limited options, particularly on winning edges. So these are some of the issues. When many of them get there, yes, a good number of people have actually got there because they actually summarily say they get value for money. Yes, the tax is there, but they know exactly what they're going to get, and then they begin to plan along that one. But because the condition of living and the cost of living commensurably with what is obtainable in the country here is a bit higher, they need to work more. They need to do more, to make more, to meet and fund their fancies, if at all they will even be privileged to do that. So these are some of the downside. But the other side, the good thing about moving to other countries, especially in a country, in the context of our country where we produce what we don't consume and we consume what we don't produce, is that when you move to all those places, you can actually have opportunity to learn from world-class institutions. If the motive for relocation is to build capacity, to network, to become a global leader, yes, that is a good and viable option. And many young people are actually doing that. And that's why you will see many of them actually go, they network, they find opportunity to engage with multinationals and NGOs, and they come back and reinvest in the country. So this is in two ways. But one thing that I'm going to be concluding this particular question with is a lizard in Nigeria, like one of our fathers said many years ago. He said a lizard in Nigeria can never be a crocodile in New York. No amount of hamburger will turn a lizard to a crocodile. If you are not value-oriented, if you are not actually in your little space in Nigeria, you have not been, of course there are problems everywhere. If you have not actually been solving problems, there are some of these problems that does not require any fund. It's only require the willpower and the need to identify that this is an opportunity for me to express my own genuity. You are seeing out of school children. You can actually encourage them. Some of them are in our neighborhood. If you have not been committed to doing that, looking for one opportunity that is not available anywhere, you will never find it anywhere. All right.
All right, so now what can the Nigerian government do to make the country suitable enough for the youths and skilled professionals to stay?
Yes, thank you. Because some of the factors that we actually raised earlier involve economic downturn, political instability, social challenges, or socio-economy issues. To address some of these things majorly lies with government formulating policies that are developmental in nature, that can resonate with the needs of the people at the grassroots. You know, we are good at coming up with policies, and then when we are constituting committees, we get people that actually have not lived a life that deals with the reality of the people at the grassroots. So what do you expect? You can't bring people from Harvard that has always known much about American economy to come up with a policy that will deal with the peculiarity of the business landscape of Alaba International Market or the one in Aba Market, all right? So these are some of the issues that we have been faced with over time. So government actually needs to work on revitalizing economy first and foremost. That is the most important thing. And unfortunately, economy cannot be revitalized in a politically tense environment where there is political instability, where some other social challenges are constituting a lot of menace around, like insecurity, terrorism, banditry. Now, in terms of landmass, we have huge landmass. We have huge natural and mineral resources. Ideally, with the model that God and the makers of the heavens and the earth has put in place for each nation, we can, as Nigerians, enjoy, you know, by comparative advantage. The northern the northern part of the country has its own peculiar advantages. The southern part, the eastern, and all of that. Now, we should be able to move around and enjoy and work, even if there is a form of congestion in a particular region. People should be able to move and spread to other places where there are scarcity of skilled labor. All right? But this cannot happen in a state of acute terrorism, hologrammatic terrorism. And then we in a state of uncertainty about security of lives and property. All of this actually will make people to remain where they are. Because we know as we're talking, Lagos is dense with opportunities, but of course with a lot of challenges because more people are in Lagos than any other places for economic reason. So what if these other regions have been built and have been grown favorably, with minimal concern for insecurity, as it were? Definitely we're going to be having more young people also working in that region. So these are things government should do. Government have been working. But you see, if we are committed to making this country work, everything wouldn't start and ends on the policy document or paper. It's in the implementation. And in implementation, it is about monitoring and evaluation. When we don't monitor our project implementation process, then things go wrong when the project is supposed to be closed. There's what we call project closure. At the level of closing the project, if that is the level you are beginning to discover fundamental, intricate problem in the process, then that is already a way too long a time to discover that. You may not be able to go back. Number one, resources have been depleted, funds have gone, and so many losses have been incurred. All right? So these are some of the issues. Government actually needs to really work more on that. And in terms of economy, the society must become more economically viable for young people to thrive. The ease of doing business, even though, from all of the information we hear and most of the interventions that are being rolled out, if the environment is not sane enough, is not, for example, we know of the Tony Elumelu Foundation. These are individuals also that have been able to, we have many of such programs that are meant to empower young people with not just knowledge or business advisory, but with funds, seed capital, of course. But if a winner of such kind of fund gets $5,000 in Nigeria, and a Ghanaian gets the same amount of money, I want to tell you, the Ghanaian is already an edge above Nigeria. Because while you are struggling to put up office space, you are struggling to put up basic infrastructure, power supply, you are generating set, because if you really want to work with power, you need to be thinking in terms of alternative power supply. You have to be thinking about inverter, that can actually power up, as a way if the regular power supply that has not really been working over even despite the enormity of investment that have been put into it. All of those things have already been taken care of in some of these other countries. So from your own $5,000 seed capital, you are already, with, and again, bottlenecks. Thank God for most of the things the government is doing. We actually need to be very fair. Most of these things are being digitized. Many of these models are being, to avert a lot of bureaucracy. Because some of these registration models and many other things to make companies, organizations to be viable, to work and operate, makes the process very cumbersome and difficult, but in other countries. So when all of these things are put in place, and again, the last thing there is we must not stop educating our people. Because to be informed is to be transformed, according to one of our fathers in the faith. But to be uninformed is to be deformed. Many people are not informed adequately. All right? There will be options. At a point, even in your growth process, you may need to move out of the country for better exposure, for you to be able to come back and solve problems specifically. But the truth of the matter is that education actually helps. Lin Kuan Yew actually said in his book, From Third World to First World, the Singapore story. Of course, we know that Singapore so used to be one of the third world countries. They were even more deplorable. Nigeria isn't deplorable. We have only been laced by mismanagement and leadership deficit. We have resources. Singapore never had that kind of opportunity. But when Lin Kuan Yew actually sought for opportunities and then nations to help, even in all these developed countries, and they couldn't, he returned back and he embraced three things. Number one, educating the people, embracing entrepreneurship, and empowering the young people, empowering the people, empowering them, educating them, and encouraging entrepreneurship. These three things turn Singapore from third world countries to first world countries. So Nigeria can do the same. Nigeria can empower. We need to keep educating, and then our media should not be influenced, should not be politicized. Let information be objectively given to people. That is the best way to actually live in a nuclear family. When the father appears to be unquestionable and unaccountable, the young people, when they are growing, after some time, they will keep quiet. One day, the father will return back home to realize that he has no family anymore. All right, so I think that can actually help us in a great deal of way.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Felix.
Thank you
For
so
helping us shed issues on those critical issues. It is evident that while migration might be a personal decision for an individual, its ripple effect is felt across the nation. So as young Nigerians moving abroad, there should just be one goal, and the goal is to ensure that Nigeria becomes a better country. Either you're going completely or you're returning to come reinvest in the country, ensure that your focus is to make Nigeria a better nation. And that's the much we'll be taking this morning. Do join us again tomorrow for another episode of Frontline. My name is Adiola Adegoke. Good morning.